channel on a MonsterVerse Retrospective. I am your co-host, Kent, and with me is your other co-host.
What up? I'm Jason.
So, since the MonsterVerse, at least for the moment, appears to have been concluded with the most recent Godzilla vs. Kong movie, we decided to talk about the saga as a whole and just kind of give our thoughts and whether or not we thought this particular American incarnation of Godzilla and then some of the other characters worked really well, and whether or not maybe we hope to pursue again later on in the years to come. As of this moment in time, there are rumors that maybe there is going to be a sequel to Godzilla versus Kong. We'll see. Time will tell. But we're just kind of here to just discuss it. Good, bad, ugly, the exceptional, all of that stuff. So, Jason, you kind of want to get us started here.
Yeah, I know we basically started Daikaiju Network, previously known as Planet X Control Room, back in 2010, and that was essentially when all talk and everything about the another American version of Godzilla was going to be made and released in 2012. However, that did not happen. And so
Fukushima.
that too. Well, and then some other things came into play, and we were kind of on hiatus for about a year and a half, and then all of a sudden more rumors came into play, and then of course we get eventually the 2014 film of Godzilla, and then everything went on from there with Kong Skull Island, King of the Monsters, and then just recently Godzilla vs. Kong. And with this second iteration of the Hollywood American version of Godzilla, uh, and then the first appearance of Kong in a movie since the Peter Jackson take the uh, of the monster in 2005. Just with how everything has been in play and planned and executed for all these four films, I really enjoyed on how overall these four films really did with not only the kaiju's themselves, but also making this really grand story that kind of uh, eventually came together with Godzilla vs. Kong, and then all of the other characters, from the 2014 Godzilla all the way up to Godzilla vs. Kong. I really enjoyed them, even though that we get, different characters from, the 2014 and then 2017 Kong Skull Island, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and then you get half and half of new and returning characters in Godzilla vs. Kong, but a little more on the newer characters. But I think just with everything, and then visual effects, story, characters, everything just melded in pretty damn well with this whole MonsterVerse.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who has listened to our podcast over the last, gosh, it's like 7 years now, from the 2014 Godzilla up to recently when we talked about Godzilla versus Kong, knows that by and large, I am also a pretty big fan of the current MonsterVerse. It's by no means perfect. I have definitely had some criticisms, even
Well,
some
both of
strong
us.
criticisms of this particular franchise or saga at points. And then I've kind of thought back on some of those criticisms. The movie I think I have been the most harsh on is Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And I don't remember if I discussed this or not a couple of years ago when we talked about the film. But the reason why I have been so much more harsh on that film is because it's the sequel to the 2014 film. And Michael Doherty and his team decided to abandon a more serious, slightly more logical, kind of a quote unquote darker approach for something that is definitely an Americanized version of what Toho typically has done in the past with most of their other Godzilla films. It was slightly more lighthearted, slightly goofier. It definitely pandered a hell of a lot to fans. It was something that at the time really turned me off because, um, you know, um, I love all the Toho stuff, but at the same time, I think it, and I've said this before, I think it's very important that these characters every so often kind of hit the reset button. They try to do something different because that's the only way that these characters are going to continue to stay relevant for decades to come. We've seen it many times before with Godzilla. We've seen it, many times before with superhero characters, etc. So, I really was disappointed that just the darker, slightly more serious approach that we got in 2014 was abandoned for a more Toho-esque style. And I was very harsh on that film, and I recently had watched it, and I realized, okay, there's still some things that bother me because, again, similar to Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, where it just was kind of like the studio jumped the shark abruptly and way too soon. Um, and that's sadly, I think, always for me going to hang over that particular film like it does for me with Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. As I stated in their Daikaiju Fest panel discussion on Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, I said that if that particular film were, say, like the fifth or sixth film or seventh film in the Heisei era, I probably would be a bit more forgiving of it because, with a lot of franchises, the more films you tend to have, usually the kind of goofier and wackier they get with each new installment. But I thought with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, it was whiplash inducing. You had two pretty adult oriented, serious Godzilla films in The Return of Godzilla and Godzilla vs. Biollante, and then boom, you get into kooky, goofy, sloppily written Godzilla with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. That's always for me hung over that film, and part of the reason why I really don't care much for that film. Even if it was, let's say, the seventh film of the Heisei era, which would have been the last, um, I I still would be looking at it kind of like, meh, it still isn't all that great, but I may enjoy it a bit more because I'd be like, okay, it just gradually got wackier because that's kind of what happens a lot of times with these franchises. Um, and kind of like with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla King of the Monsters did the same thing, except one movie sooner, where in the second film of this new franchise or saga, whatever you want to call it, it kind of jumped the shark. It didn't jump the shark as badly as Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah did, but it jumped it enough to where I remember walking out of that theater the first time going, okay, in fact, I love the incarnations of King Ghidorah. In fact, this is my favorite Ghidorah, is from this film. Author, I love the Rodan, but just the story, the handling of the story, and just some of the themes, um, just it was not handled well. There was a lot of fan service. In fact, I call it pandering because it's so thick in that particular film that I just was turned off by it. Because I'm like, if I wanted to watch a Toho Godzilla movie, I would watch a Toho Godzilla movie. I don't always want the same thing
Mhm.
in my Godzilla movies. And in fact, I'm going to share a little something here
And
with everyone here because this is something I've repeated numerous times on the podcast where the fan and part of my problem with King of the Monsters and how some fans have regarded it, um, similar to, um, you know, uh, is similar to their reaction to these films. Can I share something on here?
um
Will people see it?
uh it maybe, but I want to put my point in. before you do that, and I'll kind of switch over to full camera for yours. I'm kind of basically right on the same page as you on this one, even though I do like the action, the visual effects, and the characters that are in King of the Monsters. But overall, yeah, it just felt like it was just sort of forced with a lot of pandering within this movie, and just felt more like a more of a reboot of Ghidorah the three-headed monster, because you basically get
And I'm
the
okay with
same
that,
the
actually.
same monsters from that movie, um, but of course, up to date from that point. Uh, yeah, it's just a lot of the pandering that was just forcing, even with all of the marketing that they did with this movie. And I think, in my opinion, out of the entire MonsterVerse films, I think that the King of the Monsters was the most heavily marketed film, but yet it's the least grossing film in the entire MonsterVerse films that we get, and you can definitely tell uh,
Well,
with some of the audience that they didn't quite get with what was going on.
I want to defend the film on that front for 1 second, because what we have to remember at that time, if you remember, that movie had the unfortunate happenstance to come in what I think a couple of weeks after Endgame was released. And um, I blame the studio on that, because I think what ended up happening, because Endgame made $1 bajillion, and I think a lot of people may have had fatigue with blockbusters, because you know how in the past, there was always kind of that one summer blockbuster that everybody was talking about. And for the last almost 20 years now, you're having multiple summer blockbusters. And we're getting to the point now, too, where you're starting to see blockbusters, not multiple blockbusters, not just in the summer, but even in the spring and the winter. Like, we're getting them course of the year now. And I think part of the reason why the film financially just didn't do as well as expected was also because of just the fatigue, because so many people went and saw Endgame and saw it multiple times, that I think King of the Monsters kind of got buried a little bit under all that.
hmm So let me get you into a full cam here. Just give me a moment here, and I'm gonna have
But
to
while
cut out.
Jason's setting this up, what I'm about to show everybody is something that I've said multiple times on this podcast, and I still continue to see even today, where so many fans like have criticized the Godzilla franchise for being the same. And then when people come along and do something different, they criticize and go, well, I don't want that. I want monsters to go smash. And so then they're like, okay, we'll give you Monster Smash. And then they start complaining about other aspects within the movie. Well, this, and that didn't work. And I heard a lot of people say that with King of the Monsters, certain things like the environmental message was never played through. And that's very true. The movie did not follow through on a lot of that in terms of explaining it. But how is that much different from other Toho Godzilla films, for example?
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, pardon me, are bitching and moaning just for the sake of bitching and moaning. But then too, I heard a lot of people, oh, the 2014 Godzilla is boring. You don't see a whole lot of Godzilla. Well, you know, a lot of people, you guys out there are fans of the Alien and Jaws films, right? I mean, I don't care much for the original
In the
Alien. I think
54
it's
Godzilla.
Gareth Edwards took his inspiration from those two films to kind of do that for his Godzilla film. Initially, yeah, when I first saw the movie in theaters, I'm like, I don't know what I just saw there. But then when I went and saw it a second time and a third time, I'm like, holy shit, this is magnificent. Like, I love what he's doing here. And I just, and then people are given more action in King of the Monsters. Sure, Godzilla's only on screen for like an extra, I think, 3 minutes in King of the Monsters, but you're given in general more monster action, and a lot of people are complaining stuff there. But can I
Yeah, let
present stuff?
me transition over.
Let me
All
know
right,
when.
you're good to go.
Okay, here. My entire screen. Okay, so this is something, I'll leave this up for a moment. This is something I really want to share because I think part of the problem that I'm seeing with a lot of people when it comes to the MonsterVerse has basically everything that is being said here. And I know this is sort of poo-pooing on the fans, but let's admit it. Let's admit it. I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we the fans are a huge part of the problem with any sort of issues within the discrepancies and inconsistencies of any sort of Godzilla saga. And this here really says it all. This has been one of the favorite things that I've seen on the internet in recent years, and it's so perfect. I mean, it describes not just the Godzilla fan base, but it describes so many other franchises as well. And I think, especially in the day and age of social media, fans definitely have a louder voice now than we used to have, because with social media and other means of being able to communicate with studios and production teams and what have you, we tend to have a little bit more of an influence now than what we used to have. And I think we as a fan base need to be more careful and more understanding about what we say and how we say it on social media. I'm not saying that we need to um, not voice our opinions, but I think we do need to be more careful with our words and how we express them, and to also really think about our own personal inconsistencies. What is it that we've enjoyed before, are hoping to have or to expect in subsequent films, and whether or not those values jive with what our expectations are. And I think, and I'm going to just go ahead and stop this now. Um, and I just really hope that the fans take that to heart. I know I've been really hard on fans periodically over the last, I think, 7 or
Well,
so
not just
years.
you,
And
but
I
me
think,
as well.
well, and I've seen other people, thankfully, like I've started to slowly notice other people are starting to kind of get, see all this as well.
Hmm.
And part of my problem with the MonsterVerse has more to do with the fans and their expectations. And as a result, I can tell, because you clearly see it on the screen from just even from Godzilla 2014 to King of the Monsters, how different those two films are. And you know damn well that part of the reason why King of the Monsters is the way that it is because of fans.
Hmm.
And again, I do like King of the Monsters. Like I said, I've been overly harsh on that particular film in recent years. I'm trying to mellow out more because I do find it to be fairly entertaining. It's just kind of whiplash inducing. Um, but it's really, it's, I lost my train of thought. But anyways, I want to transition just for a quick moment because I kind of want to go through movie by movie briefly. Um, to Godzilla versus Kong. Godzilla versus Kong, I have to admit, the first time I got done watching, I'm like, this isn't exactly what I wanted. And again, I do believe, kind of like with King of the Monsters, you see fan service being played out with this particular film. And the more I watched it, the more I fell in love with it. And I'm like, okay, here's the deal with Godzilla versus Kong. This thing is ridiculously entertaining, but it's seriously stupid as well. And I hate to say that, I really do. Because again, not only did the trailers tell me that maybe we were starting to get a slight return back to kind of the tones of 2014, but I really had hoped, because this is one of the most anticipated rematches in cinema history, that this was going to be taken a bit more seriously as well. And instead, what we got is something that is, while entertaining, um, Matt Frank in many ways said it best when he said The movie is like a Saturday morning cartoon. And I think that describes it perfectly because it reminds me of like, the 98 Godzilla cartoon series where, you get kind of, some realistic stuff going on, but then there's kind of this far out element in play
And then
as well.
one of the things too that I want to reiterate is, when you bring up Matt Frank's quote on Godzilla versus Kong and kind of your uh, uh, kind of overview uh, opinions on Godzilla versus Kong, I would say that from what I've read and stuff on online when it was getting closer to the release of the film, that the way how they put it, I sort of kind of came to the conclusion is that we were going to get, basically just more battles and less human story simply because of the outcome or the execution of the battles when it came to King of the Monsters. When you see all these big battles, but then all of a sudden it just went into a different scene with all the humans and stuff, not really seeing much of the action going on between Godzilla and King Ghidorah and Rodan and Mothra. I think that was sort of the case when it came to this movie's with Wingard's, that he wanted to focus more on the action between Godzilla and Kong and less on the human elements of the story because of King of Monsters, the way how that was put together and executed. Because a lot of people, you know, even though that a lot of people liked King of Monsters, one of the biggest gripes from what I've heard was simply, cutting away from the action when it was getting good.
And that was a big deal. A lot of people had too with the 2014, but that was done intentionally with 2014.
hmm And so simply, you can say when it got serious with 2014, you can basically say that sort of dumbed down all the way to Godzilla vs Kong, where basically you got what you paid your money for. It's just battles between the two titans of kaiju cinema right there.
Well, and one of my other gripes about Godzilla versus Kong, and um, I said it on the podcast when we covered that not too long ago, was what the hell happened to those other Titans? And again, I've always said that I think part of the reason why we never really got to see our battle royale between Godzilla and those other Titans, maybe even getting Kong involved with that on some level as well, could have been budgetary reasons. The budget for this film was in the out of the three Godzilla movies that were produced by Warner Brothers and Legendary. This one's budget was in the middle of King of the Monsters in 2014. It was slightly lower than King, but slightly higher than 2014. So I think maybe budgetary reasons had a lot to play with that. But the thing is, as I know, and I said this in that podcast as well, and I think side note here, I think for this panel, we're just going to start off with the bad and end with the good here. Get it out of the way. But getting back to the discussion here, um, I you can see as at least as the MonsterVerse progresses, it does tend to get more fan pandering and it tends to get more ridiculous as well. You start off with 2014 in a more what I would consider serious, more down to earth approach to the subject. Skull Island kind of approaches it the same way. Then you get King of the Monsters, and it's kind of like, oh man, like, but it's still fun. It really is because anybody who's listened to our commentary on that film from late 2019 knows that I love that King Ghidorah. I was saying all along, we finally got a King Ghidorah that is a badass.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I love that King Ghidorah, and I like the Rodan, and I like the Mothra in that film as well. I wish we would have gotten a little bit more of those guys. Um, And by and large, I do like the movie. It's just that the tones and the approach to it was so different from 2014. I'm kind of like, wait a minute, this wasn't what I was hoping for. And I've been struggling with that ever since, trying to like, okay. And like I said, for whatever reason, I struggle more with that movie and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah than I do with any movies, because usually I'm pretty good with taking movies as they are and accepting them on their terms, regardless of whether I like them or not. But King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah are films I've really struggled with because they came after tonally different films that I really loved and enjoyed, and it kind of is whiplash inducing to see that. And I'm kind of like, oh, like there are things here I like, but a lot of just kind of the general tone and everything else of it, I'm not digging all that well. And
Hmm.
it boggles my mind because when I saw that King of the Monsters in theaters, I thought to myself, the Godzilla fandom at large should love this thing. And for the most part, they kind of do. But I still am seeing more and more people griping um, about certain things like the story. There's a person that I'm friends with on Facebook who hates the anime trilogy, loves the whole fan service pandering stuff, wants monsters to slap each other around, and I've seen this person say that they didn't care much for King of the Monsters, and myself, I go, well, this movie is made for you because monsters are slapping each other around. Yeah, it's not perfect, but you have issues with this film, and yet you seem to be okay with, a film like Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, which is an absolute fucking mess. I don't quite understand it, and it's the hypocrisy that I've seen that kind of has me dumbfounded with kind of the reception of certain entries within this monster verse from fans. I kind of want to get off the fans case though, but I'm trying,
I
I
think
want to
we've
get
done
off
too
of that,
much of it already.
but it has sort of jaded my view a little bit of how this monster verse is. So I want to kind of go quickly, like movie by movie. We'll just start from the beginning in 2014 with that movie. In my opinion, that's the best out of the MonsterVerse. I love that film. I love the acting. It's so much better than I think people give it credit for. I think it's totally underappreciated. I think a lot of people, for whatever strange reason, don't understand that Gareth Edwards was imitating Jaws and Alien by giving you just enough, but as the movie progresses, give you just a little bit more each time as well. And a lot of people complain about the darkness level. I've never had issues with that with the film, but of that film, I love Godzilla's look and design. I love the Mutos. I love the cinematography. To me, that's a film that still holds up 7 years later. And my hope is that as time passes on, that people will look back on that film and start to love it more fondly because I think and I'm not saying this because it is my favorite out of the entire MonsterVerse saga. I truly do believe it is the best made MonsterVerse film uh, here.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it the first time when I saw it, and I think I saw it in IMAX, I believe, the first time around. And just with the characters in that story, all I really liked them. Although I kind of wished that Bryan Cranston was in there a little bit more. But I mean, if Gareth Edwards didn't have any more use of his character, then I'm all right with it in a way. But yeah, just the story, the color palette. I think color palette fits with this movie in perfectly, just the way how that film was executed. And yeah, the even though that there wasn't a whole lot of battles that you saw, you just kind of saw it more or less from a human perspective per se compared to the rest of the MonsterVerse films. And I think that hasn't really been done all that much in the entire franchise per se when you think about it. I think it might have been done maybe a couple times. I can't quite uh, figure out certain movies in that regard, but it's an interesting take, just from a human perspective. While you see uh, what the whole situation is going on in the background, and from in their situations, and yeah, the story, how that was executed just for this movie, visual effects, uh, just the battles that we get to see between Godzilla and the Mutos and their designs. Yeah, I think it fit in perfectly just for this kind of movie.
And you talk about the death of Bryan Cranston and how so many people were upset about that. While I understand that, I like that because it proves that this particular universe, no one is safe. And that's something that you don't get a whole lot in these types of movies. Typically, when you open up a film and you get your more or less your cast of characters to start out a movie, you go, they're dead, they're dead, they're dead, they're gonna live, they're gonna live, they're gonna live, dead, dead, dead. Like you can easily point out who's gonna be around by the end of the movie. What I love about the MonsterVerse is that that is not the case. I mean, you get it with this film, you get it with Skull Island, you even get it with King of the Monsters, where big
Mm-hmm.
name characters and with portrayed by big actors end up getting cut out. You don't really get that though with Godzilla versus Kong, but by and large, nearly 75% of this saga kills off some decent characters portrayed by decent, if not great actors, and that's what I love about this MonsterVerse saga because typically you look at them and you're like, dead, 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 live, 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 dead, 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 and you know like it's so easy to figure out what's going to happen. And that's
Mm-hmm.
another thing that I really enjoy about the saga as a whole, but also the 2014 film as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was, when I first saw that, I was a bit shocked. I was like, "What? He really died?"
Yeah, I was shocked too, but then at the same time, I'm like, holy shit, like this is actually cool though, because it means the stakes are high, no one is safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why I loved it so much. I loved it because Bryan Cranston died. Okay, there, I said it. No,
His character, by the way.
his character, allegedly. Who knows? Maybe by the fifth entry, like he'll come back and be like, "Hi, Ford. You thought I was dead." Jokes on you, son.
Oh god. So let's go from the 2014 to the 2017 Con Skull Island.
A lot of people find this say I find a lot of people saying that this is what they consider to be the best, if not their favorite, out of the MonsterVerse. I do like the movie very much. I do think by and large it's well made. You got a really high profile cast here. I'm not as in love with it as most other people. I think the film tends to drag more than it really should. I think that there was missed opportunities for more creature battles or Kong versus X creature battles. I think there was missed opportunity, and even though you get great actors in here, Samuel L. Jackson, John Goodman, Brie Larson, Tom Hiddleston,
John C.
their
Riley.
character, John C. Riley's character, out of those big name actors that I just named, has the only character that is fleshed out to a point to where you can kind of understand what's going on. And part of that is because the movie opens like in the middle of World War II. So we get to see him as a younger
Well,
man. We kind of
actually,
know.
Vietnam War. Just to correct you.
No, he fought in World War II.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're talking about the beginning part. Yeah,
Yeah,
never mind.
I know the film takes place just after the Vietnam War. Um, so we get some backstory at the beginning of the film, but also through his dialogue and just kind of his shenanigans over the course of the film, we find out about him. But all those other actors, maybe minus Samuel L. Jackson, maybe is the only other one that kind of comes close to for the audience to kind of understand who he is. Most of these characters, though, are very one-dimensional, at best two-dimensional, and John C. Riley is my favorite character for many obvious reasons, and all the other actors I think do a decent job. I think they could have done better. These actors are supposed to be great, and even with maybe a script where their characters aren't as well fleshed out, typically good, if not great actors can sometimes, through their performance,
Well,
add 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 other things to the character to add other dimensions. I just don't think the characters in this film are great. Um, they're they're decent enough. They are what I would consider your standard typical monster movie type of characters. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I just am trying to battle this misconception that people are saying out there that these are great characters. It's like, no, these at best are average for this type of film. But as for what you, let's just talk about characters here. You go.
yeah, and I think besides John C. Riley doing a really good job within this one, I also think that John Goodman did a pretty good job with his character because I think he was kind of that other kind of more multidimensional type of character too because you kind of see him just doing his regular thing, but he also kind of had more of a secret thing until kind of later on in the movie until you understand some of the reasons of why he was there and all that. So he's he kind of had some other things going on sort of behind the scenes until that certain point of the movie before he
I
died.
disagree with that because he threw hints of it early enough in the movie to where we kind of knew where it was kind of going. His character, though, we still don't know much about who he is and why he's obsessed with Hollow Earth the way that he is. This is nothing more than like a conspiracy theorist who is just really obsessed with the subject matter that he's into, and that's about it. We don't know much about his personal life. We don't know why he's obsessed with it. All we know is that he's obsessed with it and that he believes you can find an entrance to Hollow Earth from Skull Island. That's all we really know and ever get out of his character. John Goodman's a good actor, but his character is one dimensional.
Mhm.
But getting to other parts of Skull Island, I love how Kong looks. I think the initial entrance of Kong is really exciting, really cool. The helicopter fight. Um, uh, the skull crawlers I think are really cool. I think this whole movie is a nice, unique take on the traditional Kong story. Um,
Mhm.
at the time, I don't think it was necessarily a given yet that Godzilla versus Kong was going to happen. I think it was in the works still. But I like the fact that it wasn't a retelling of capturing him, taking him to New York, and doing the typical thing that you do in most Kong films. I like that it was different. Other than the characters, though, my other disappointment was just the fact that opportunities were had where you could have had Kong battling either more skull crawlers and or other creatures fighting each other, and we get some sides a quest with some of these minor characters that I have no connection to, whom I don't care, that kind of get picked off one by one. And to be perfectly honest, I find myself rather kind of bored throughout a decent chunk of the middle of the film. Um, it's there just was missed opportunities to really reel me in. You did a fantastic job to start out the movie, and then the ending of the movie is pretty darn good. Um, here is where I have a lot of issues, minus John C. Riley's parts. Like he's kind of the only part within the middle part of the movie that I really am like paying attention to. But there's still when it comes to the monsters and the strange creatures, nothing really excites me here. And that's very unfortunate because you had plenty of opportunities to do something unique, and instead you play it very conservatively. And the end result is, from a creature slash monster standpoint, it's a pretty dull middle section of the film.
Yeah, I uh, also really enjoy the take of the appearance of Khan, how they sort of, I think they said that they melded or kind of taken the appearance of the original Khan, which you can definitely see, but also sort of meld in some of the other iterations of Khan there, and it gives the sort of a different look, but as I stated earlier, kind of a more familiar look that we've seen of Khan, from the 1933 original. And yeah, I really do like how the story went. It's a tad bit similar to kind of the whole uh, Khan story that we've seen time and time again from the past, but more of a new, different take to it, as Kent stated, where people go in, venture around, capture Khan later on, and then take them back and everything. But it's just a more different take where the entire story is just based on Skull Island. But yeah, I wish that there could have been more bouts between Khan and maybe some of the others, like he has done in past movies, whereas like various ones, instead of just focusing on just one creature that is the skull crawlers here. So I don't know if there were different kinds of other good sized monsters on that island that he could take on besides the skull crawlers. There, I know there's like those spider type of crawling things, but I don't know if they didn't seem that big enough. And then of course the water buffalo thing, but he didn't really. He more or less protected them in one of the scenes there, but yeah, it's sort of dragged on a little bit in some things, but I think it's sort of tried to establish some of the stories in between and kind of make sense of things here and there, which, I mean, it's understandable, but sometimes things can take a little too long to flesh things out. And, but yeah, in the end, I think it balanced uh, everything out from previously, and I really do like this sort of story for Khan.
Yeah, I mean, by and large, I still find it to be a decent film. I don't think it's this overwhelming, um, masterpiece that some have claimed it is. Look, if you think that, if you really enjoy this film, hey, again, more power to you. It's your opinion. You're more than welcome to say that. I just don't see it. And in fact, Skull Island is my least watched MonsterVerse film. In fact, even when Godzilla vs. Kong was on streaming on HBO Max there for that 31-day period, I saw that movie more times in that 31 days than I've seen Skull Island over the last 4 years. So it, I don't hate it. Like I said, I find that middle to be disappointingly dull, and it's just disappointing because Kong has so much potential, and I think movies in which the potential for Kong has really been fully realized were in the 33 and the '05 films. Those I hold up as the gold standard of Kong films. After that, I would put Skull Island right underneath those two. I think Skull Island comes next in line. It's certainly a hell of a lot better than that really dull 76 film. But, I just found it interesting that they decided to go for a more, it's like they pulled back on the reins a little bit. Like they kind of just didn't want to give you too much because Kong, by and large, is missing for a large chunk of this film. And I just thought that that was not necessarily the right make. And a lot of people will say, well, that's what they did with Godzilla. No, there was an artistic approach to Godzilla for his film. That wasn't the case for Kong here. But let's just go ahead and move on into King of the Monsters.
Well, we've sort of discussed about this
Well,
earlier.
the things that we just didn't care for, anyways.
Yeah, I with my little discussion that I had earlier, it's sort of a reboot of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster with the same monsters in it, but of course, much updated version of it, and then different story and setting and all that. I really do like the executions and the appearances or designs of not only Godzilla, even though he hasn't changed except for a few things. Uh, I really like the design of Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, and like Kent, I really do like this iteration of King Ghidorah in this one where he's like, uh, you know, right there being a badass and doing what he's there to do, than just being like a coward in a way in most of the films that he's been in the past. And I really also like the story of how that was set up, and even the characters, uh, the human characters in this one. It just it seems like that they were part of this whole monster verse in a way, sort of like the characters in the 2014 Godzilla.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into the negatives of King of the Monsters again. I've already said my piece and spent enough time on that. But again, though, and I've already said some good things about it too. I love all the monsters in this as well. I thought though the changing of Godzilla's dorsal plates though was kind of silly. Again, it's another one of those fan pandering things. They look good, don't get me wrong. I just thought it was unnecessary. Um, but said I've been overly harsh on this film. Um, and I'm trying to change my mind on that because I usually do such a very good job of just taking films as they are, even though my expectations may have been different going into it. Um, and for like I said, like with Godzilla vs King Ghidorah, it's been very hard for me for some strange reason. Although I did kind of explain part of the reason why, but it's been difficult for me to kind of get past that. And I had recently watched it because it had been a while since I had seen it in its entirety. The last time I watched it in its entirety was when we did the commentary for it in like October of 2019. And then I had seen bits and pieces of it when my son was watching it earlier in 2020. But I had never seen it all the way through since that commentary that we did. And so I sat down and watched it. And I go, you know what? Yeah, I mean, this film is by no means perfect. No film is. But I do, by and large, really like what I see here. I think this is a very entertaining film. The characters are pretty good. In fact, the characters are significantly better here than what we'll get in Godzilla versus Kong. Um, but I like what is being done here. I do wish we had more Rodan and Mothra. I think there was a missed opportunity there. It would have been great too to potentially see more of the Titans in action as well. But for what we got, I think it's a pretty fun film, and I think it's very strange and disappointing that most of the fan base didn't fall in love with this as I had hoped. Again, I still am disappointed by the significant tonal shift, and the in that they decided to take cheap and easy compliments by doing a ton of fan pandering. But outside of that, I do find the film to be pretty darn fun and entertaining.
Yeah. And one of the other missed opportunities, which I kind of wish they sort of dived into within this film, but of course, maybe with time and everything, but kind of wish they would have done more of that with Godzilla vs. Kong, which we'll get into in a bit, is sort of that ancient civilization that we get to see when uh, you know, when we have the main characters dive in to the lair of Godzilla, where we see all these paintings and sculptures, or like stone monuments, and like this humongous area where Godzilla, you know, Godzilla's main home there and everything, which we sort of get to see, with Kong when he goes into Hollow Earth. Are these sort of the same people, or could it be, in the Hollow Earth? Is it more or less the Kong? Did they build that, and is the ones that build these stone monuments and stuff where Godzilla resided? And was that more or less human? Well, obviously. Um, I kind of wish they would have delved more into that whole lore a little bit with both King of the Monsters and or in Godzilla vs. Kong.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate though, because again, I think part of it was just how King of the Monsters was received financially. I think part of it too, again, is just how fans responded to it as well. And yeah, there were a lot of things that were set up within this saga, and the end result ends up being there there was a lot of stuff just left, and you just kind of have to go with it. And they did things like the environmental message that were brought up um, in this film, which I think would have been very unique and a very fun thing to have explored, because then you could have gotten into a whole dynamic of, well, hey, even though like the villains, so to speak, of this film are talking about how the Titans will, kind of regreen the world, so to speak, that would have been a very interesting topic for discussion throughout the course of the movie, because I think you could have had some interesting character moments even on the good guy side, and I think you could have had just in general larger discussions at hand over the course of the film too. But instead, it's a line that's dropped and it's never visited again,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just disappointing.
Yeah. So with that, why don't we get into the final film here in Godzilla vs. Kong?
Yeah, again, kind of like what I had said a little bit earlier. Um, this film is very fun. If you enjoy turning your brain off and having a fun popcorn film, this is one of the best films you're going to see out there. But it is kind of a stupid, silly film. And on the one hand, that's something that I kind of dislike about it, because, again, the trailers sold me something that was maybe going to be more tonally different. I also would have loved to have had more Godzilla in the film too. Godzilla tends to play. He tends to be the second
Second fiddle.
fiddle
Yeah.
here, and I just am disappointed that uh, I like I said, I saw this film 18 times over the course of of the 31 days it was streaming on HBO Max. And the first time I saw it, I'm like, ah, man, this isn't exactly what I was hoping to get. And and what have you. But the more I watched it, the more I gradually turned my brain off and just accepted it for what it is. Another little nitpick I have is the fact that Godzilla gets really no hit or significant hits in against not Space Godzilla, Mecha Godzilla at the end of the film. Um, and Kong does, considering though Kong got his butt handed to him for the most part by Godzilla, it just kind of doesn't make sense. I look at it as the filmmakers trying to give Kong a victory, which I'm okay with, but I just felt like the way they handled Godzilla specifically in that encounter was just not fun. um, but nevertheless, and the characters are pretty cookie cutter. Um, the actor who plays Bernie, and I just had forgotten his name. I think he's fun and funny at times. I think he's got some funny one-liners, like "I gotta die here with you and sober." Like his his is a funny line. Another line he says just a little bit earlier is, "I was hoping to die with adults, but okay." Like you know, um, I I do find his character to be charming, but by and large, the characters here are very one dimensional. Millie Bobby Brown's character is very one dimensional. We don't really get too much of a transformation of her from being from where she was at the end of King of the Monsters to following around the conspiracy theorist Bernie. How did that transition go? The fact that their Vera Farmiga's character with Kyle Chandler and Millie Bobby Brown's characters is barely even mentioned. Like I would have thought she would have played more in terms of kind of their background lives, kind of them grieving more and just trying to come to terms with the fact that she teamed up with an eco-terrorist to unleash the Titans. I talked about too how I don't like the whole NCAA March Madness bracket in terms of dealing with all those Titans, but I think a lot of that again too just is due to the budget constraints, because otherwise you'd be looking at, you know, obviously more CGI rendered characters and all that. There just probably wasn't the money in the budget for that. But is a pretty fun film. I love Mecha Godzilla in this film. This is my favorite Mecha Godzilla. It's like some of my favorite of creatures like Godzilla, Ghidorah, Mothra, Rodan, and Mechagodzilla, like, and even Kong actually are my favorites coming out of this MonsterVerse. It's like the MonsterVerse got the Kaiju right, in my opinion. Like that's the one thing that not only did they get right and hit the nail on the head, but they consistently got it right. That's one of the things I love. I love this Godzilla, very agile, very powerful, a little too powerful maybe, but I love this version of Mechagodzilla. And stupid film, and I'm okay with that. This is a film that, as of this recording, anyways, is coming out just in a couple of days. I am going to get it the very morning that my Target opens, and I will watch some of the extras. And I guarantee you, I will watch it probably a couple times over this first week of its release. I mean, I do find it to be fun. You know, it is in some ways more ridiculous than King of the Monsters, but because the shark was already jumped with King of the Monsters, I can kind of go with this more, even though there's still a part of me that's slightly disappointed with it. But it is incredibly entertaining, but I do have some issues with it, as I've already discussed.
Yeah, I really do enjoy the entertainment value that Godzilla vs. Kong brings. You know, just the sheer battle that we get with this one. I mean, obviously, it's the longest battle sequences that we see so far in the MonsterVerse at this point in time, and and then I do like the iterations of the modern day version of Khan when he grows up from decades after, and then the interpretation and execution of the Mechagodzilla, which you can kind of sort of say that it's also sort of the interpretation of Mecha King Ghidorah in a way, because they use some of King Ghidorah in this film here. So you get a little bit of both within this film. Uh, however, uh, the one thing that I wish that they could have done more is more human elements of the story, where it felt like in this movie it was just barely there. And talking about Kent with the whole cookie cutter sort of thing, that's sort of kind of where I was getting at as far as developing the characters more that way, because it just felt they felt a little forced with some of the newer characters that were brought in for this movie, and then they just sort of set aside some the returning characters, which with Kyle Chandler, Millie Bobby Brown, who are the only two that return from the sequels. So that's sort of the one of the only tie-ins from the sequel to this one here, and it would have been nice if it had sort of the slow transition from their story standpoint to the newer ones that were following Khan in this, with the movie major uh, majority following Khan's side of the story. And yeah, I kind of wished uh, Godzilla was in here a little bit more too, but at the same time, I think I sort of liked on how that they were going about it in a way, because you talked about how Gareth Edwards sort of interpreted Godzilla and sort of executed the whole Jaws and Alien story within that movie. I sort of think that Adam Wingard did the same thing with this Godzilla, and it too. So you still know that Godzilla was in the background, but not present at all times. But you still had Khan in there, sort of to fill in a lot of those in between things between their battles and everything, and then of course right up towards the end when Mechagodzilla comes into play. But yeah, I really do like the battles. It's just really fun, visual effects. The story, I wish could have done a little bit more on the human element side, as well as um, with time, the time of the film. I wish they would have extended it more just to fill in with more character development in that regard. But other than that, the entertainment value with this movie, I'd say, is the most entertaining one in this entire MonsterVerse franchise.
Yeah, and one other thing I forgot to mention is we never find out though whatever happened to Alan Jonah, the eco
Yeah,
terrorist
that too.
from King of the Monsters as well, and I think that's definitely a big plot hole that is never closed. At least with the other Titans, the March Madness bracket closed that out, even though it's incredibly disappointing, but it's closed out
Mm-hmm.
and addressed. But we never hear or see anything of Alan Jonah, and again. Um, it's very unfortunate that as the MonsterVerse kind of morphed, just certain story threads are either forgotten or dropped in a manner that is by no means fun or entertaining.
Yeah,
So
and the other thing that I also want to point out too is that one of the things that I sort of have a gripe about too, and I mentioned this in one of our earlier podcasts when we talked about this film earlier this year, was that all of a sudden, throughout the entire franchise, we had the Monarch organization being discussed throughout, but when it came to this movie, they just sort of fell off the face of the earth, and then we had Apex all of a sudden come in out of nowhere. I mean, it sort of felt, you know, like I think there should have been some melding in with these organizations, and then with King of the Monsters, it would have been nice if Apex was sort of there presently, and vice versa too with Monarch, but it just you just didn't really hear much of Monarch at all. They just had a very, very minor role when it came to Kyle Chandler, and then Apex was just replaced throughout the entirety of the film.
And it still baffles me that, at least at this moment in time on Rotten Tomatoes, this one has a higher fresh score than all the others. And I keep thinking, did COVID like wipe out the more serious movie critics or something like that? Like, why is because look, I'm trying to be objective as possibly can. I find the movie to be entertaining, but it is a mess of a film though too. And I'm like, how is it possible that this film is received better by critics than films like 2014 and Skull Island, which are better made films. I mean, you may have issues with maybe the entertainment value of those films, but those are better made films. I'm still scratching my head at that. I understand why the fans love it, because this too, in some respects, is kind of a Toho in spirit, kind of a Godzilla film, where it's just kind of you throw whatever you want against the wall, and continuity and oh, what's the term I'm trying to come up with? Continuity and logic be damned. And I again, like I said, I'm okay with that sort of thing, as long as you make it a slow progression towards Looney Tunes. But this happened so fast with King of the Monsters. It's just. But again, though, look, I mean, I'm with a lot of other fans, despite the fact that I've had some complaints about the fans in terms of expectations and their hypocrisies. I'm with them in that I watch these for entertainment. But at the same time, though, too, for me personally, I like to see some things a little different once in a while, too. And I had very high hopes for this saga after seeing that 2014 film, because I was like, okay, I like where this is going. And Skull Island, by and large, despite some of my issues with the middle of that film, Skull Island, by and large, succeeded where 2014 left off as well. And then it just kind of fell off a rather steep cliff with King of the Monsters. The first half was pretty darn good. The second half, while entertaining, is totally bonkers, and that's just kind of the thing about this that just kind of has me disappointed, because it's like, look, if I want Toho style, I will watch a Toho film. But I will say this with this one caveat: there is a small part of me that is kind of happy that at least one of the films is tried to be Toho type, because I'm like, okay, what would that look like if Hollywood tried to do it? Now I know what it looks like. Is it good? Yeah, it's on par with Toho Showa. Is it what I wanted though? No, that's not what I wanted. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I stand on that.
Hmm.
And so I kind of want to discuss now, do you think the MonsterVerse was a success?
I think even though we sort of have our own uh, issues when it comes to the MonsterVerse franchise, but overall, the way that I'm looking at it, I think with the conclusion of Godzilla vs. Kong here and the reception that had it, because I know with kind of the hopes that Legendary and Warner Brothers had when it came to this film, if they wanted to continue it or not. I think overall, uh, the MonsterVerse franchise, I think, had a huge success in that regard. just with some of the issues that we've had, and maybe with the others out there too that might have some issues with certain parts of these films throughout. I think overall it's had quite a big success in that regards, even with the general audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think despite the fact though too that um, King of the Monsters from a financial standpoint didn't do as well as Warner Brothers hoped, but it still did pretty well. And the fact too, COVID, I'm not sure with streaming and all that and limited theater releases, how Warner Brothers and these other studios are factoring in sort of what the gross is of these films. But I think under normal circumstances, Godzilla versus Kong would have done bananas, no pun intended. Like this would have been, I think, $1 billion film worldwide, easily,
But
because this has been the most successful film during the COVID period.
mhm.
And I I do think the MonsterVerse, despite the issues, some of which, in fact, quite a bit of it, we've talked about here, and maybe some other issues other people have that we didn't discuss, I think by and large it was a huge success. Um, Overall, despite some of the issues I may have with the saga as a whole and even some aspects of individual films, I love this saga, and I've been sort of thinking since roughly the middle of April when the Godzilla vs Kong was streaming. I started wondering myself. I'm like, could MonsterVerse maybe be my favorite era of Godzilla films? And even though, like I said, Skull Island is one I don't watch a whole lot of. I think overall I've seen that movie in its entirety 5 times since 2017. I love the Godzilla films here. I love 2014 is just wonderful. I think it's an artistic, and I'm going to use the M word here, and I know it's going to be controversial, but this is how I feel about it. I think it's a masterpiece. The 2014 film is. I think it's the best made Godzilla film in quite some time. Um, King of the Monsters is very fun, but problematic in a few areas. Godzilla vs. Kong, as Matt Frank said, a Saturday morning cartoon. But again, I think they're all fun. I think they portray the kaiju very well. My favorite incarnations of the kaiju are here within these 4 movies. I would love to see more of this monster verse. Time will tell. We will see kind of what happens. As of right now, it seems like there could be like a Son of Kong type of film coming up. Whether or not we're going to see more Godzilla, debatable. I know Toho's wanting to do their own MCU style universe with those characters, so I don't know where they would stand on giving Hollywood the license, because it, in some level, would be competing with what they're trying to do. So I don't know. Godzilla may be MIA for quite a while in the new MonsterVerse. May not even return at all. Who knows? But I think it was a pretty big success. I by and large enjoyed the films despite some serious issues I had, because the film still won me over with some of the charm and the incarnation of the characters, the kaiju, that I mean, on screen. I had a blast for the most part. Again, Skull Island was sort of an exception, but I do love the beginning and the ending to that film. um, I think it was a success, and it seems like to me, from what I've seen through social media as well, I think by and large, most fans in the States, anyways, would give it a thumbs up. That they too, yeah, would have issues with various things. But I think overall, probably most fans in the States would give it a thumbs up.
Hmm. And as far as kind of the legacy or impact that the MonsterVerse franchise had, I think for me, even though this was essentially the first, when it came to the 2014 Godzilla film, that was the first Godzilla film since Godzilla Final Wars back in 2004, and and I think from then on, within the states, when it came to these movies, I think it started to bring in some. newer fans, from kind of the older generation and as well as the younger generation, but then as well as, kind of giving a fresher take on the whole franchise in and of itself, not only for Godzilla but for Kong as well, but then also bringing in Toho to kind of bringing in their own take and mediums of the character of Godzilla, with unfortunately the Shin Godzilla in 2016, and then you get, I would say, a fresher take of Godzilla when it came to the anime series. There, the three-parter anime trilogy, and then of course, eventually, as of this recording, I think Singular Point's going to be coming relatively soon on Netflix here, and I think we're going to be getting much more uh, Godzilla stuff here in the near future, even with Toho wanting to do their own MCU take of the Godzilla franchise. Just how that they sort of share between with Legendary and themselves with their releases and their own takes. I think it could be possible in that regards, but they probably would have to maybe make some negotiations of, okay, maybe 1 year you can release one of the Godzilla films in this year, and then the other year, or so on and so forth, we'll release these kinds of movies. So I think it could at least be possible if they wanted to go that route, having both studios, them and Legendary, uh, producing Godzilla films. Um, but if they want to go more in the Kong route, which seems to be kind of a potential from rumors and all that, I mean, I'm also okay with that as well. Just kind of maybe get a little bit of a break if Toho wants to do their own thing, and then maybe come back to Legendary, say, okay, you have Godzilla in these certain amount of films.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for maybe a couple Kong films. I don't want a saga Kong films because I think there's only so much you could kind of do with Kong. But who knows? Because the sort of typical Kong story has been done like what, at least three separate times, and I think this version of Kong, maybe you could turn him into like a Showa Godzilla saga, but would that work in today's day and age? Probably not to that extent, obviously, because
Mm-hmm.
times are different, just to put it in a nutshell. Things are so different now than they were from 54 on up through the mid 70s. And I think you could probably do like a duology, maybe at best a trilogy of kind of Kong Hollow Earth type of stories or whatever. Um, and I wouldn't mind seeing them, but I don't think you could do like an elongated saga of anything like that. The movie I really would like to see is the missing battles between Godzilla and the Titans. That's what I really, and also Monarch. Was it Monarch that? Yeah, Monarch that went to Skull Island and built that enclosure for Kong. I think you could have either one movie, if not two separate films, based around those two things. You could have one separate movie of Godzilla fighting the Titans, and then you could have another movie where Monarch's going on to Skull Island. You could have sort of another Skull Island part two, so to speak, where you do see Kong fighting other beasts and stuff while they're trying to build that outpost to enclose Kong in, as this severe storm system is encircling Skull Island as a result of Ghidorah's appearance from the previous film. So, or you could mishmash into one film, but I don't know. Maybe that would be too jarring because Godzilla and Kong would not meet in that film. So yeah, maybe make it two separate films. But that's just an idea. Sort of the parts, the two films that are in between King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong,
And
interquill movies.
and so with that, do you have anything else to add before uh, maybe say as far as your overall rating on the MonsterVerse franchise?
I think my overall rating on the MonsterVerse franchise is, despite some severe issues in a couple places, by and large, I walk away from it overall pleased. Entertainment value, by and large, is there. 9.5 out of 10. I mean, I really do love this saga. I know I've complained quite a bit about certain things, but I don't necessarily think that certain things are damning enough. I'm very forgiving with a lot of films, even though, yeah, there's some things that still kind of bother me, but in the large scheme of things, I don't lose sleep over it. So
Mm-hmm.
I love the MonsterVerse. I would love to see maybe a handful of other films. But at the same time, if this is all that we get, I am perfectly pleased with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, a rating out of 10 for the overall MonsterVerse franchise that we have so far, I would give it a 9 out of 10. You know, just with the sheer entertainment value, more of a human story development that we get, kind of a grander sort of story that ties all four movies together. Uh, right up to the conclusion with Godzilla vs. Kong. There are some instances with each of the movies that I have issues with here and there, but by and large, overall, it's a I really like the entertainment value, the stories, the characters, uh, the kaiju and the battles, even the visual effects in that regard. And yeah, I just really enjoy this iteration of all of the classic kaiju's, and I've stated before in our Godzilla vs. Kong discussion that for many years I had this thing in my mind that we would get a new take on the Godzilla and Kong battle, and sure enough, that's what we got. Just about close to 50 years uh, after the first take of the Godzilla and Kong battle. In that regard, plus we get Mecha Godzilla into the mix, and that made it even better between the two. And yeah, it's the the MonsterVerse franchise. It's I think, in my opinion, so far is probably the best series so far out of not only the Godzilla franchise but the Kong uh, franchise as well.
Yeah. So, anything else you need?
Nope.
So, I think with that, we conclude this panel on the MonsterVerse retrospective of Daikaiju Fest 2021. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed it and continue to enjoy the rest of Daikaiju Fest 2021.
Well, see you next time.